Welcome, welcome, welcome. We are back in this. Welcome everyone to the Play by Play podcast. I am Brendan and I am here with Sterling. And you know what? We actually have a little bit of a lighter week this week. We do have some interesting conversations definitely to talk about. But yeah, so obviously, we want to talk about the Washington football team getting their new name and such, but we also want to talk about some of the other interesting topics that have happened throughout the week. So,
Yeah, bit of a slower week this week, obviously. You know, that off week between conference championship and the Super Bowl. I call it an off week. I know they have the Pro Bowl, but I know neither of us are really interested in that. I don't know, it doesn't have the same feel to it as like the NHL All-Star game or the NBA All-Star game. At least those sometimes matter, but I don't know. All-Star games overall have never really interested me. They got to find a way to make it mean something. You know, at least Major League Baseball made it so the winning team gets home field advantage in the World Series. You know, at least
yeah,
they made something to play for.
yeah, and I've just always looked at the Pro Bowl the last couple of years, and like they've tried to do different things with the Pro Bowl. Like obviously, I remember it was like 15 something years ago. They had Deion Sanders versus Jerry Wright, and they would be like, "Oh, we're gonna have the Legends teams, and it's not gonna be the AFC versus the NFC anymore. It's gonna be these two legendary players. They're going to go up and basically kind of like do a draft system almost and
Yeah, they
pick their
do like a
players."
mini draft on the Friday and Saturday and then play the game on Sunday.
Yeah, it was kind of like
Yeah.
a fantasy draft system, which I liked at that point because it was like, you know what, like we get to see these two legend players go up and kind of pick and choose, and then obviously they decided to get rid of that, which I didn't necessarily think was the right thing to do because it was something fun. Like you could sit down on like early in the week and just watch what they're gonna do and how they're gonna draft their team and see players that you normally never get to see play with each other from
Yeah,
different conferences.
I think the problem was finding old Hall of Fame players that were both willing to do participate and coherent enough to be able to be on the mic in front of the camera for that long, making picks and explaining the reasons and all of that. I think too many of them have the brain injuries and they wouldn't be able to get through it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's why the NFL was like, nah. You know, we had the couple of guys that were announcers. Who knows? Maybe now they'll bring something like that back. We got a lot of recently retired guys like Peyton Manning and Tony Romo who we can see are able to be in front of the camera and talk coherently.
What a matchup that would be to see Eli versus Peyton, because obviously Eli was always in the NFC and Peyton was always in the AFC. That'd be awesome to see them go after that, and like, you know what,
Right.
we're gonna bring back that draft style system that they had,
Yeah.
and it would have been really entertaining to watch, I think.
Yeah, I think so.
But
Yeah, that's why
yeah,
we got a bit of a slower week. I mean, not a lot tends to go on in the NFL. Otherwise, there was a lot of interviewing for those positions still, but most got filled last week, and then I think most of the others that were available are taking their time with picking their new coaches, their new GMs, all that sort of stuff.
yeah, all the GM slots are filled at this point because there was only three, or there was four. It was Chicago, New York Giants, Minnesota, and obviously the Raiders.
Yep.
And but yeah, going back to the Pro Bowl, it even when it was kind of that like Jerry Rice versus Deion Sanders, it was still a boring game. It was just like these guys don't care about it. Like you just look at the players, like they're it doesn't even feel like they're really having all that much fun while they're playing it.
Well, yeah, and I wouldn't say it's not so much don't care. It's they do care, but they care more about their health. You know,
Without a
football
doubt.
is a very physical game. And for them, they're sitting there going, why are we playing a game that doesn't matter at all towards standings, paychecks, anything, stats, and we risk an injury that could put us out for the entire next season, which means we don't get paid then either.
Yeah.
So I
Yeah.
don't really blame them. I think the NFL needs to find something else that they can do on Pro Bowl weekend rather than having all these superstar players playing. I really liked back when they would do more of the skills competition stuff all the time, longest, who can throw the deepest pass accurately and stuff like that.
No, and that's something that I was just about
Keep
to bring
keep
up.
yeah, keep the physical aspect and the tackling aspect out of it, but at the same time, as fans, we don't want to watch flag football.
Mm-mm.
Maybe throw all these players' kids out there and let them play some tackle football.
Well, exactly. It's one of those things. Maybe instead of it being like a Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday type thing, with Sunday being the Pro Bowl, which, let's be honest, does anyone really watch the Pro Bowl all that much?
Hmm.
And it kind of just feels like an off week. Maybe instead of like those Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, have it just Saturday and Sunday where we just get to see all those skill competitions. And like what you're saying, maybe we get to see some of the players who do have kids go out there and play if they are players.
Yeah.
Obviously, there might be some older, but yeah, it'd be fun. But yeah, bring back that longest pass. Like,
Hmm.
just imagine Patrick Mahomes, Josh Allen, some of these just massive arm guys going out there. Like back in the day, we saw like what Peyton Manning, Brett Favre, and some of those guys do it. Just imagine what we could see now.
Right. Well, and I mean, like, another thought I had that was a little bit out of left field for it was there's more meaning in like the college all-star game, for example.
Yeah,
Because those guys are still playing to show what they've got to possibly move up the draft board on a team. So something I was thinking is if they expand the NCAA playoffs a little further, you then do the Saturday Sunday and you have the college all-star game on Saturday, and then you hold that national championship game for Sunday, and
yeah,
that's the
yeah.
first like big Sunday game that these college players really get to play is that national championship on the Sunday between the conference championship and the Super Bowl. And I think that would be a really interesting way to go about it too, because I know a lot of us, we work Monday to Friday jobs, we don't necessarily get to see that national championship game on a Monday night.
Yeah, yeah. I've always thought that the national championship game should be a Sunday night thing just because it is just so big. It is so important. Obviously, you don't want to, interrupt NFL watching for the national championship game because these are technically students.
Mm-hmm.
But at the same point, like, the national championship game for the NCAA football is one of the most viewed, hyped up games that is out there. Like, this year, I was really, really excited to see what Georgia and Alabama was going to do. Everyone thought it was going to be Alabama. Everyone did.
Yep.
And then Georgia came out of nowhere and was like, we were the best team all year. You might have beaten us in the SEC championship game, but this is still our year, and we're going to take that back. And yeah, Alabama had a bunch of injuries and people who got hurt, but at the same time, Georgia came out to play. And who knows, maybe if those injuries didn't happen, we would be seeing a much different game and a much different outcome.
Yep. Yeah, I've always sort of wondered if maybe they don't have it on a Sunday too, because there are a lot of colleges that are religion based. And I know a lot of college games don't happen on Sundays, and I almost wonder if that's part of why, if there's some religious aspect to it, that, these guys are supposed to be in church rather than playing football while they're still in college. I don't know. I don't understand it myself. I'm not religious that way, so I don't want to step on any toes.
Exactly. For
Yeah.
me, I know Notre Dame particularly is a very, religious school. I can't not for the life of me remember if it's Catholic, Protestant. Again, we're not going to be stepping on anyone's toes. This is a sports show, not a, political one. But
Right.
yeah, it is one of those things that might be the case. But I feel even then, like the universities, we live in such a society now that they'd be like, you know what, like we get it. Like you're going to be like a bunch of you guys are going to be playing in the NFL anyways, so here you go. Like
No.
you might as well just get used to it. You can go pray in the morning. But yeah, Pro Bowl again. It's always fun to see how many of your players made the Pro Bowl roster. I know with the Bears, they only had two guys make the Pro Bowl. We had a kick returner and Jakeem Grant. He made for special teams, which I thought is pretty good because we only acquired him. It was like week 7 from the
Yeah.
Dolphins in a trade for like a next year's 7th round pick. And you know what? He was phenomenal for us in the special teams unit. And then obviously we had Robert Quinn, who definitely deserved to be there. He was second in the NFL, only behind your guy in sacks.
Yep.
And, you know, when you're number 2 behind the defensive player of the year, obviously that hasn't been confirmed yet, but you know what? It's pretty much you have to give Watt the defensive player of the year. We've talked about that obviously
Yeah, we
at
did.
length, but yeah, so Robert Quinn deserved to be there.
Yeah.
My thoughts.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, and I think the Steelers had 2, possibly 3. I'm not sure if our punter ended up getting voted in or not, but it was just T.J. Watt and I think Najee Harris.
Which both deserve to be there for sure.
Yeah, very much so. But that being said, there is still some NFL news. You know, we did have the conference championships last week, and so we now have our Super Bowl matchup set. It's, I mean, half of what we thought was going to happen, and the other half that we didn't expect to happen. Or at
Yeah,
least that I didn't. I really expected the Niners to win, but man, that Rams defense shut them down at the end there.
that they did. Then they really did go back, and you know what? I don't even necessarily think it was the Rams defense shutting the 49ers offense down. It was more Kyle Shanahan just kind of playing way too conservatively, and then when they were playing too conservatively, they couldn't get the engine moving back again. And
Yeah.
the Rams, they were just focusing on their game plan, similar to what we always say with Sean McVay is he's always, this is my game plan. I'm going to stick to it. If it works, it great, and if it doesn't, well, I guess we're just gonna stick to it. And
Definitely. And I mean, the 49ers still have an excellent team. They got a great young quarterback in Trey Lance. Not to take anything away from Jimmy Garoppolo or Kyle Shanahan, like he didn't have a lot of options. You know, Jimmy Garoppolo has been playing hurt for weeks, and it's a significant injury with that bone chip in his throwing hand. That's got to make it so difficult on an NFL quarterback, especially in the playoffs. You got to make accurate passes, and when it's hard to grip the ball, I I can't fault Jimmy Garoppolo. You know, I know there's a lot of people hating on him and saying he's overrated, he's washed up, he's no good, but you know what? He needs surgery in his hand, significant hand surgery. And I think once he gets that done, he's going to come back, he'll be 100%, and whichever one of these NFL teams out there decides to trade for him, they're going to have this hidden gem of a quarterback that's going to be able to turn a team from outside looking in to a playoff contender. You know, and people are writing him off, and I think wherever he ends up landing, that team is all of a sudden going to be a playoff team next year. And I know my Pittsburgh Steelers are one of the top 5 teams that people are talking about going after him. And I kind of hope they do, honestly, because the 49ers have already expressed that they're moving on from him, which means they're not going to be able to get the value that he's worth. You know, they've said that they're not going to have him there next year, which hinders them when it comes to a trade, because nobody's going to offer up 2 first-round picks or a superstar player or anything for him. I think they're going to be lucky to get a second-round pick and maybe a 4th and a 5th. You know, that's what I would say. You know, and going forward, offer a couple of mid-round picks, maybe a second, bring Jimmy Garoppolo in. Hopefully, after his surgery and after the recovery process has begun, so we can all the teams can see that he is making progress towards coming back to 100%, because it is like the bones in your hand are very small, it's very delicate, it's tough to repair that sort of stuff. So
yep.
I hope he comes back. I'd love to see him in Pittsburgh. That if we could get him for cheap, that would be a steal, especially with that more college style RPO offense that Matt Canada wants to run. Jimmy Garoppolo ran a lot of that when he was playing in, was it Illinois in college? I think he played.
Eastern Illinois, yeah.
Yeah, you know, and so that could really fit well with him. It would help him get back to that 100% health, due to the fact that it's a lot of quick passes. He's not going to get hit a lot, hopefully. Najee Harris is going to be in his second year with hopefully a better offensive line there that can open up more holes, so we could see a lot more run game happening. It could be interesting. It's definitely added another dimension to what my Pittsburgh Steelers can do in the offseason, looking for that next quarterback.
Oh, for sure. And, obviously this week there was a lot of hate going towards Jimmy Garoppolo. And, I think one of the best people to bring up a stat was Good Mornings Football, Kay Adams. She brought up a thing where, you know what, this guy is a winner. When San Francisco has him, he's like 38 and like 6 or something like that. It might be like 38 and 8. I would have to take a look at that again, but like it was something like okay, yeah, that's impressive, like to have that level of success. But then when the 49ers don't have him at starting quarterback, they're like 6 and like 25 or something like that. It is just atrocious. And you sit
Right.
back and you go, yeah, the 49ers, when Jimmy Garoppolo has been playing, have been a really, really good looking team, and they have they just have superstars everywhere they go. And obviously the 49ers, when they lost a bunch of games last year, they were a really hurt and banged up team, but the point is still there. It's like this guy wins. Like
Yeah.
the fact that he has he had that team and he brought them to a Super Bowl just a couple of years ago. I think a lot of people forget that Jimmy Garoppolo, and I think it was like his second year with the team, brought them to a Super Bowl.
Well, exactly. Yeah, and I mean, and the record is 35-16, including playoffs, since he's been with the 49ers.
Yeah.
And it, yeah, I I have to agree. Like he has that all-star quality. And I mean, he learned behind Tom Brady. The only reason the New England Patriots didn't keep him is because they knew Tom Brady was going to be with them for several more years, and they couldn't afford to have two-star quarterbacks on the roster. So they
Well,
had
they
to move him
couldn't
out.
afford to pay him,
That's
and
what I mean.
yeah.
Yeah. Like it's crazy, and that's what it came down to this year. If he had been healthy, I think the 49ers are in the Super Bowl and had a very good shot to beat a team like the Bengals. But an unhealthy Jimmy Garoppolo, especially with that throwing hand, if it was in his other hand, we'd be having a different conversation.
I think we definitely could have easily been having a much different conversation, that's for sure. But yeah, and when it comes to Jimmy Garoppolo, what I'll say this is that is he going to be a top 10 quarterback in the league? No. He's never going to be a top 10 quarterback. Just because I think he's a good game manager, but there's no X factor after that. And now, not to say that being a game manager in the NFL is a bad thing, because I don't think it's a bad thing. Tom Brady is one of the best game managers to ever be around. Look at Drew Brees. All he did throughout his entire career with New Orleans was, I'm just going to throw the ball to my playmakers and let them do it. Yeah,
Yeah.
he is one of the greatest quarterbacks to ever do it, but yeah, he's also a good game manager. But all of these guys also have that X factor about them, that little bit of extra something something. I just don't think Jimmy Garoppolo does have that little something something, but he is also a phenomenal game manager as well.
Yeah.
And
And
that's just the thing.
and I mean that we haven't seen an X Factor ability from him yet. Who's to say, he goes to another new team and heals up from this hand surgery and comes back and he could still develop into a great quarterback. He's only what, 28 or something like that, 29? Like he's not super old. It's not like he's washed up by any stretch.
Not washed up by any stretch, but I do agree with someone in the chat saying you're not going to win a Super Bowl, Jimmy G. And I do think that. I think when they were in the Super Bowl with the 49ers and Jimmy G, obviously they were going up against Patrick Mahomes, but it's one of those things is in that game, it's going to be who has the better guy. And
Yeah.
I genuinely think, for instance, you look at the 49ers potentially going up against the Bengals this week or next week in the Super Bowl, who's the better quarterback there?
Oh,
It's
Joe Burrow,
it's
hands
it's
down.
Joe Burrow. It's not
Yeah.
even a question. If Kansas City won, it's again you're having to go up against Patrick Mahomes. If the Bills beat, you know, Patrick Mahomes and Kansas City Chiefs, Josh Allen's the better quarterback, and it is just one of those things of I don't think you're gonna win with a guy like Jimmy Garoppolo just because there's always going to be someone better. Yeah.
Well, yeah, you would need the perfect storm to win with him because I mean, like, say the Titans didn't fall apart, Jimmy Garoppolo against Ryan Tannehill, you've got that Jimmy G could win that game. He could be the better quarterback in that situation. So there are situations where I think he would have that opportunity. But yeah, against any of those top 5 quarterbacks in the league right now, it would need to be a perfect game called by the coach and a perfect game from your defense in order to give you a shot to win at that. And
Without a doubt.
that's why with Pittsburgh, I could see it being possible with the defense we have and the running game potential going forward. Anything's possible.
Without a doubt, anything is possible, but yeah, if and what I'll say for you with your Steelers, if they do decide to go after Jimmy Garoppolo, they do have to have their next option on their roster, I think. Like I think Jimmy Garoppolo right now, he's kind of going to be in that role around the NFL as you're going to bring him in as a guy that can be on your roster for 1-2 years and help bring a guy along.
Yeah. Oh,
And
I agree with that completely. And I mean, hopefully we do still get the quarterback we want in the draft this year, but whether we do or not, Jimmy Garoppolo, much like I think Marcus Mariota, are better options to have for a 2 to 3 year stretch if we don't get that quarterback this year, that we could then draft a quarterback next year. Whereas having Mason Rudolph or Dwayne Haskins, you have to have our next guy on the team as well, competing for that starting role if that's the 2 that you're going with.
without a doubt, and I think that's something that Pittsburgh is going to look at. But honestly, with with the support that Garoppolo has gotten from the San Francisco teammates, this last week, I wouldn't be surprised if the 49ers just end up keeping him on the roster because one of the biggest things with Trey Lance when he was coming into the draft was, yeah, he is just this freak god, athletic wise, but he was also playing at the Alabama of the Division 2 football world. And like this team, like North Dakota State could honestly be a Div 1 team. I think they should be a Div 1 team at this point. They've proven over the years that they are just without a doubt better than the rest. I'm not saying they're going to be jumping into Div 1 and winning natties. I don't think that's going to be the case, but you could throw them into a Div 1 conference, maybe like the Mountain Division. They could potentially maybe go in there and upset some people. They could do that. But
Yeah.
you know what? But the bit kind of going back to Trey Lance is that he was never that guy that you looked at and go, this guy is NFL ready. Everyone said this guy's 2 years away from being a quality starting quarterback. And that's why for me, I always looked at him and I went, he's kind of my number 5 on my board just simply because there's just too much unknown. At least with Patrick Mahomes, when you were looking at him, you're like, this guy has so much upside that if you let him sit for a year and develop properly and put him in the right scheme, he might be something. He might be really, really good. And then obviously the Kansas City Chiefs were like, you know what, we're going to pluck you. Thank you very much. You are going to sit behind a really, really good quarterback in Alex Smith. And you are going to sit for a year and then you're just going to, casually do your thing, being the best quarterback in the league.
Oh, definitely. And I agree. That's my philosophy on quarterbacks is they should never be day one starters. They should always be coming in and learning the game and learning the schemes behind another quarterback before they're thrown to the wolves.
Yeah. But and with Trey Lance, again, another good point that Kay Adams brought up is you got to keep Garoppolo around because he knows the scheme, he knows how to run it. And the only reason you move on from Garoppolo and let Trey Lance get that role is if Trey Lance is overwhelmingly, and I'm talking overwhelmingly, the better guy. And we obviously didn't get to see Trey Lance too much in a lot of action this year, but the fact that even with Jimmy Garoppolo's hand, there's a broken bone in his throwing hand. The fact that most of the year we heard nothing about Trey Lance, and the things that we did hear about Trey Lance later in the year was, well, he's definitely not progressing the way that we want. And you're sitting there, if you're a 49ers fan, you're going, well, then why did we draft this guy? Like most of these quarterbacks, like you're looking at, Trevor Lawrence, he's playing the entire year. Is he having a great year? No, but that could also just be coaching. You're looking at Zach Wilson. It's like, well, he got drafted by the Jets, so we'll see where that goes. Then you have Justin Fields. It's like, well, he has Matt Nagy. Let's see what happens if we get rid of Matt Nagy. And then you have Mac Jones. It's like, okay, this is a kid who definitely didn't deserve to start day one, but he was better than Cam Newton without a doubt. And Bill Belichick looked at him and said, you know what? Like, there's going to be a lot of growing pains, but you are my best option right now. And look at what the Patriots have done this year. Like, there was legitimate worries from both of us going like, God damn it, the fucking Patriots are back and they're playing really, really well with this young rookie quarterback. It's like looking like Bill Belichick got himself a Tom Brady light.
Yep. Yeah, and I think it'll keep looking that way going forward. They're just going to get better each year.
Yeah, yeah. And so going back to the 49ers, it's like you're sitting there going like, well, everyone else's toy is being used. Yeah, they're having problems, but like this is upsetting for us. And remember going back to the early part of the year, we're all looking at the 49ers going like, well, they're kind of not a good team. So we're kind of happy that they ended up drafting Trey Lance, but then they turned it around.
Yeah.
Since Jimmy Garoppolo figured it out. But yeah, so for me, if I'm the 49ers, I'm not willing to give up Jimmy Garoppolo until after the preseason, just simply because you just don't know what you have in Trey Lance right now.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, like if I'm John Lynch and I'm running the 49ers, I would do the same thing. I would keep Garoppolo, at least through the preseason, if not till the end of his actual contract.
Right?
Like sure, it would be nice to get some return on that investment, but at the same time, if Trey Lance isn't quite ready, what better option do you have out there than Jimmy Garoppolo?
Yeah, and
Since he's so familiar with Kyle Shanahan and the system, do you bring in somebody else, trade Garoppolo away? I don't think you do. I would keep Jimmy G around, let them battle it out a bit in preseason. Honestly, I think Garoppolo would still win the starting position at that point. So I only brought it up because there is a lot of discussion that the 49ers do plan to trade him away. I don't think they should. If Trey Lance has a phenomenal offseason and comes into training camp looking lights out, and the Niners are all excited and go, okay, yeah, he is our guy now. Then, yeah, after preseason, you shop Jimmy Garoppolo around. Maybe there's a team that didn't get the guy they wanted, a team that had an injury throughout the preseason or training camp, and then you move on. But yeah, to do so now before the draft or even during the draft, I think would be a silly move for the 49ers. Let Jimmy Garoppolo have his hand surgery, which he may have already had, or it could be coming up soon. Most guys, it's within 14 days of their season ending that they go get this surgery done. That way they can start rehabbing right away. And see how things look come July and August. Hold on to him till at least then.
well, without a doubt. And I really do think that's what the 49ers are going to do, because obviously all that report about, the 49ers are going to trade Jimmy Garoppolo this offseason came before the playoffs.
Yeah.
They were so close, and now I think this is kind of the perfect segue to talk about the game. Yeah, they came so desperately close, but the Rams, Matthew Stafford was not going to be denied this year.
No, his first year with a new team outside of the Detroit Lions, he's like, no, you guys, see, I am fucking good. I do deserve to be in a Super Bowl, and I'm going.
Yeah,
I've been telling you this for years. I just need it out of Detroit, and you would see what I can do.
Well,
and it's going to
exactly.
make for an interesting matchup this year, because Matt Stafford getting his first Super Bowl appearance, after coming to the Rams for his first season, and then Joey Burrow he is the first overall pick take his team to the Super Bowl within the first 2 seasons of being in the NFL.
Yeah, yeah, and we'll talk about that probably a little bit more. But yeah, I'm kind of wanting to talk about the LA Rams and the 49ers game. Like the Rams, Jimmy Garoppolo really did just play, or not Jimmy Garoppolo, Sean McVay really did call a perfect game.
Yep.
And that Rams defense came to play. They were just lights out, the better. They were without a doubt the better team that night. They really
Yes.
were. And yeah, going forward into that Super Bowl matchup, the Rams, they have a lot of good offensive pieces from the wide receiver standpoint. You know, OBJ, he looks like he's really, really dialed in and focused. Obviously, he played phenomenal with the Giants, and then he goes to the Browns, and then he just kind of is like, I don't really want to be here.
It's the
And
Browns.
and then obviously all the stuff that happened this year, then he gets sent, well, he signs with LA, and then he's like, okay, yeah, I'm actually going to play with a good team. Yeah, I'm going to start trying again.
Yep.
And I have this guy who's breaking records on the other side of me at the wide receiver point, making my life easier. Sure, I'm happily going to take Cooper Kupp on the other side. But yeah, now going over to I think the game that neither of us thought was going to end the way that it did. One of us is more happier than the other in the Kansas City Chiefs and the Cincinnati Bengals. Obviously, I want to get your take on it first.
Well, I mean, you know me. I wasn't really happy with either team being there. I didn't want to cheer for either one, but I cannot cheer for the Bengals. And so I was hoping the Chiefs would get through just so whoever got through in the NFC could beat them. But honestly, the better quarterback and the better team won. Joe Burrow is just looking unstoppable this year. The Cincinnati Bengals finally have themselves a franchise quarterback, which scares me. It's gonna shift my Steelers mindset to let's build a team to beat the Bengals rather than let's build a team to beat the Ravens.
Yeah. And honestly, I think at this point, it is one of those things where Joe Burrow has really just shown the NFL world. It's like, yeah, you all kind of forgot about me last year. Yeah, I got hurt, but I was without a doubt the better quarterback than Herbert. And everyone's talking about, oh, Herbert's just this such great guy. How could the Bengals miss on, Justin Herbert? Yeah, Joe Burrow's good, but like Justin Herbert, I honestly think Joe Burrow took offense to that, and a
And
lot
he
of
should.
should, without a doubt. And people, when I was talking about Joe Burrow even before the season started, people are like, well, you know what, he's playing for the Bengals, like he's only going to do so much. I'm like, we're all forgetting what he just did at LSU, where he casually walked out there and threw 60 touchdowns with very minimal interceptions. And he was one of the most unanimous decisions for the Heisman Trophy ever. Like that broke records. And
Yeah.
then yeah, he had to have some struggles at the beginning of the year, but that's just because he didn't even play a full season in his rookie year.
Mhm.
And
See, that,
now that he got all that time, it's like once he got to the playoff time, it's like, yeah, I've got this NFL thing figured out, which got scary for the rest of the league.
yeah. Yeah, and I mean that was one spot where I was agreeing. At the start of the season, I was thinking, you know what? He's on a Cincinnati Bengals team that historically does not do well. He's coming off a bad injury that could potentially change the style of play that he does, and who's to say that he doesn't take another big hit and that ends him, which is very typical for a Cincinnati Bengals team to take a phenomenal quarterback and have him go right down the drain, just like the Cleveland Browns do. And
Yep.
so I'm happy for him as a person and as a player that he bounced back from that and he is playing so well and he has turned that team and that city around. It's going to make this division so much more competitive going forward for the next decade.
It is. But yeah, I like what you said, the better quarterback in that game truly prevailed, which to say a quarterback is better than Patrick Mahomes, it feels weird. But at the same point, when you say Joe Burrow, it doesn't really feel that weird. Like when you look
Yeah.
at Joe Burrow and the way that he plays, it really does feel like this is the year where he's just saying to everyone, I'm the best that there is in this league, and everyone here is just going to have to get used to that for the next 20 years.
And it's funny too. We're entering a new era in the NFL where we seem to be talking about this every season.
Yeah.
Every year there's another new quarterback that's stepping out of the shadows and going, yeah, I was great in college for a reason. And I'm here to stay. I'm going to dominate my division. I'm here to dominate this league. And I have a feeling we're going to see the same thing happen next year. I think we're going to see Trevor Lawrence step out of that shadow in Jacksonville now that he's got a real NFL coach. And we'll be talking about Trevor Lawrence next year. Maybe not in the Super Bowl. It is still a really shitty Jags team. But I was saying that last year about the Bengals. I was saying, Burrow, it might be 4 or 5 years. It's a really shitty Bengals team. And here they are going to the Super Bowl. So who really knows?
Exactly. And a really funny thing that I saw was if you went back to 2019 and told the Bengals fans that they would be in the Super Bowl for the 2022 season or for the 2022 Super Bowl, they would look at you and tell you to fuck off. Like, don't lie to me.
Yeah, quit teasing me.
Yeah. And you'd be like, don't worry, you're going to draft this kid out of LSU named Joe Burrow. He's going to get hurt in his first year. The Chargers are going to draft a kid named Justin Herbert and make all of you guys feel like shit. And then Joe Burrow, that following year, after coming off of a horrific leg injury, he's just going to take over the NFL. But yeah, like going back to what you were saying, like we always feel like there's that next guy. With some of those guys, we feel like, oh, like this next guy, like I was great in college for a reason. It just feels different with Burrow. Like when I look at Lawrence, I look at him and I go, what we saw this year, we saw a guy who looked completely out of his element. And with Joe Burrow in his rookie year, he at no point did he look out of his element. He was on a really, really bad team and he was getting used to the NFL, but at no point did he look out of his element. Trevor Lawrence, there was times this year you just looked at him and you're like, this guy looks lost. Like he just looks like he just doesn't deserve to be out there. And obviously we've seen Trevor Lawrence versus Joe Burrow, and Joe Burrow sat him down and said, listen here, sweetheart. It doesn't matter if we were in the same draft class, I'm the better guy.
No.
And I'm not saying that you're going to be wrong in that, situation where Lawrence could break out, but I'm just really pounding the table going like what we see with Joe Burrow is special. Like this dude is truly a different level.
It is now, but honestly, I look back at last season leading up to that injury he had, and that injury occurred because he was a little bit nervous and panicked his first year in the NFL. He was getting outside the pocket too much. He was taking bad hits. He was making bad decisions, and like I put a lot of what happened with Trevor Lawrence this year on Urban Meyer. I think he came in and he just confused the hell out of that entire organization. He did a shit job. He was not good at coaching. He was not good at leading. And that, I feel, is why Trevor Lawrence felt lost. I think he went in there prepared to be an NFL quarterback and was like, why does this feel like I'm still in college? Because that was how Urban Meyer was trying to run it. Trevor Lawrence prepared himself mentally to come into an NFL team and take the next step in his career. And I think he felt like he was in senior year number 2 of college, is what and that's what it felt like watching it too. Urban Meyer running that team, it just didn't quite feel like it was supposed to. And after Meyer was gone, we started to see some of that Trevor Lawrence personality and his traits come out a little more. He was feeling more confident. He was throwing the ball better. He was moving outside the pocket and running, just like we saw with Joe Burrow at the start of this year. He came in after that injury, and he started off a little bit wobbly, and then he just got dialed in.
Yep.
And it went up from there. And I think that's what we'll see from Trevor Lawrence, is we'll see that little bit of jankiness in the preseason and through the first 3 weeks. And then that Jags team, I think, is really going to start making a push for the playoffs after that. I think Trevor Lawrence will be a great quarterback.
I think he's going to be a good quarterback.
Yeah, he's not going to be on the level of Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow right away, but I do think he's going to eclipse Justin Herbert and Josh Allen next year.
And just to sit down and really think about that, like, the AFC is just stupidly stacked with quarterbacks. Because obviously you have Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen and Joe Burrow there. I think the best out of those three is Joe Burrow.
I agree.
But then, you have guys like Justin Herbert. And if Trevor Lawrence does get to that level, you just add another guy. But another guy that we're forgetting about is Mac Jones.
Yeah.
Because this is a dude who very easily could still win the offensive rookie of the year. I don't think he's going to because of how good Jamar Chase was.
Yes.
But yeah, and he's only going to get better in year 2, we think.
Mm-hmm.
We think, but just like that AFC, if you really don't have one of those guys, it just feels like for the next 15 years, if you don't have one of those guys mentioned, it might as well just be like, sit back, we're going to be in for a rough year, boys.
I disagree, honestly. Like, the AFC it's looking so much different from the NFC, because you drop down to that second tier of quarterbacks and you move some of those second tier guys to the NFC, and all of a sudden they're the talk of the NFC, because you got Tua Tagovailoa, who turned that Miami Dolphins team around this season and went on a run near the end, and he was showing flashes of what he was in college as well. You've got the Raiders with Carr there, and he was leading a team that was full of all kinds of drama this year, where if they didn't have that drama, I think we're talking about them finishing in a much higher seed and having more advantages in the playoffs. There's a lot of other guys out there in the AFC that we overlook, because there's guys like Joe Burrow and Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen in there. And it just, the quarterback crew in the AFC is so impressive that it's tough to say who's going to be the guy in any given year. Joe Burrow's it this year, but who's to say next year the Bengals could fall off? Teams could start looking at it and going, well, if we double team Jamar Chase and we've got a good middle linebacker in there spying these tight ends, what does Joe Burrow have?
Joe Mixon.
But other teams with these strong running games, the Titans, couldn't do anything with Derrick Henry in the playoffs. It'll be great during the regular season, but come playoff time, if you shut down those key tools, what else does that guy have? And that's what it is. We've seen it with Patrick Mahomes. He was dominant for a long time, and then when guys started double teaming Tyreek Hill and making sure they had Travis Kelce covered, what could they do? It was Patrick Mahomes scrambling outside the pocket and trying to run for a first down.
Yep, but then we've also seen the development of that offense, because obviously we were seeing a lot of that at the beginning of the year, going, you know what, I think the NFL has figured out how to stop this Kansas City defense, but then Andy Reid just sat down with Patrick Mahomes and go, just take what's literally open.
Yeah.
And then it completely shifted, and we're like, oh, great, the Chiefs are back. And then what? And you know what? The only reason that they lost that game was because they took the foot off the gas, and then they let we're looking at that, like, the way that I looked at that game was the tortoise and the hare.
Yeah.
Where the hare is just so far ahead, decides to take a nap, and then wakes up, he goes, I might as well finish this off, goes and realizes that he lost. That's honestly what that game felt like. They were just
Yeah.
going, 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 going. And obviously that big stop at the end of the second quarter, that it really did feel like a massive momentum shifted with that. And it was like the Bengals were like, okay, we got this.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a big mistake by Andy Reid. He should have taken that field goal there.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. That was definitely the game changing moment there. It shifted the momentum completely.
Yeah. Yeah.
But that's what I'm saying, and that's what separates the superstar long term quarterbacks from these guys who are just 2 or 3 years really good, and then they sort of fizzle out.
Yeah.
We see it with every generation of quarterbacks. There's guys that they rise up and then they just fall apart. And we thought it might be happening with Patrick Mahomes until he did calm down and realize, hey, I don't just have to focus on these two guys. And that's my only question about Burrow going forward. Is he going to be able to dial it back and go, okay, well, I can't just keep throwing it to Jamar Chase because these guys are double teaming him all the time.
Yeah.
I need to get back to my basics and run through my progressions. And that's all I'm saying. I think Joe Burrow does have that brain ability and that superstar quality that he will do it.
Yeah. Yeah. But yeah, what a game that Kansas City Chiefs Bengals game was. I know you were cheering for the Chiefs. I was going ahead and cheering for the Bengals. They were my defaulto team to cheer for in the playoffs. I honestly thought they were going to beat the Raiders, and then they were going to go into Tennessee, and it was going to be a tough game for them. But you know what? Like I'm happy that I was able to jump on this team for the playoffs. Obviously, once next season starts, am I going to continue to be a Joe Burrow fan? Yeah. But am I going to be a Bengals fan? No. Why? Because I'm a Bears fan.
Yeah. Yeah. Honestly, I'm feeling like I should cheer for the Bengals because I have had such an abysmal playoff run this year. Like every team I'm pulling for has lost. And so I feel like maybe if I cheer for the Bengals, they'll lose in the Super Bowl. But even then, I still can't bring myself to do it. So go Rams. Let's get Matt Stafford at his Super Bowl. Old man Stafford, he had to endure being in Detroit for a decade of horrible, horrible football. And let's get him a Super Bowl, and then he can go and do whatever they want to do in LA.
Right. Yeah. Well, another big announcement that came only a couple days ago is the Jacksonville Jaguars. Obviously, we were talking about them earlier with Trevor Lawrence, but they go out and hire former Philadelphia Eagles head coach and Super Bowl winner, Doug Peterson.
And that is one of the key reasons of why I think we're going to see that reemergence of Trevor Lawrence. Because Doug Peterson is a much better coach at the NFL level than Urban Meyer could ever hope to be.
Without a doubt.
And I think Doug Peterson wouldn't take a job with a franchise quarterback unless he believed in that quarterback. We saw what happened with him in Philadelphia, and I don't think he would make that mistake. And so I have a feeling he's going in there knowing Trevor Lawrence is his guy, knowing he can get it done with Trevor Lawrence. And I think the two of them are going to turn that team around, finally, for the Jacksonville organization, who has gone through years of downs with occasional little blips up with guys like Blake Bortles out of nowhere that does, as I said earlier, they rise up. And then all of a sudden, they're just nowhere to be seen after that because they don't have the ability to adjust and maintain that high level of play.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I think this was a really, really good move for the Jacksonville Jaguars. Obviously, I thought they were going to go with Brian Leftwich throughout this entire hiring process. At one point, they even said, we have hired Brian Leftwich, and then it was just kind of sitting in limbo going, okay, what's happening? And then it was, okay, well, no, the news isn't confirmed yet. This, that, and the other thing. We're still interviewing people. And then finally, Brian Leftwich was like, fuck you guys. If you're not going to hire me, I'm not going to, I'm not playing these games anymore. And then a day later, they go, you know what, we're hiring Doug Peterson.
Yeah, and unfortunately, that it speaks to the Jags organization, the way they went about it. I think that was their plan all along. And Smart plan. I have nothing against Byron Leftwich. I think he is going to be a phenomenal head coach wherever he does land. He deserves a head coaching job. But I think the Jaguars looked at it and they pulled the trigger a little early. And then they were like, do we want a rookie quarterback and a rookie head coach all at the same time? That it was a recipe for not good things happening. Like, I don't think it would have been a good fit for Byron Leftwich. It would have hindered his ability to advance his career. I think there are much better options out there for him as a head coach, such as the New Orleans Saints. And I think that's where Leftwich will end up landing ultimately. I don't think it would have been a good fit for Jacksonville. And I think the news just leaked a little too early while they were still interviewing other guys. And I think Doug Peterson was kind of their hope for a while.
He was the first head coach that they ended up interviewing.
Exactly. And I just think they were worried about the negative press that was going to come along with, oh, we announced Byron Leftwich, and then we switched and decided Doug Peterson. So they kind of let it linger until Byron decided to pull himself out of that race.
Yeah.
Just to try and make themselves save a little bit of face. It's unfortunate for Leftwich, but I think he's still going to land a head coaching job somewhere. Minnesota's another spot that I thought he could potentially end up going and replacing Mike Zimmer.
Nope.
But yeah, exactly. They had hired somebody else already. So.
They hired the Rams offensive coordinator.
Yeah. I just thought that was another potential landing spot. But I think the Saints is where he's going to land now.
Yeah, and now talking about all this head coach hiring and stuff like that. With Brian Flores, obviously, he released a statement this week where he is suing the NFL and a couple of teams over a racial hiring process. And he singled out the Broncos, Dolphins, and Giants in particular, saying that the only reason that the Broncos and Giants had him there was to fulfill the Maroney rule.
Yep.
And which, for people who, if you don't know that rule, it's where the NFL, for every hiring process, whether it's GM or head coach, you have to hire at least one black candidate because, you need to give equal opportunity for everyone. And Brian Flores felt that for the Broncos and for the Giants, that he was only interviewed just simply to have that fulfilled, and they had no intentions of ever hiring him. And I know there has definitely been situations in the NFL where black candidates have definitely just been brought in. For instance, I look back at when the Raiders hired John Gruden back again. Everyone knew as soon as that process was started, John Gruden was going back to the Raiders.
Yeah.
Everyone knew that. It felt really bad for... I felt bad for the minority candidate that the Raiders hired because that guy knew going into that process that he had to know in the back of his mind going, they've basically already said John Gruden has got the job. I'm just being hired to be hired. Yeah, it's a great experience, but you kind of feel bad for the guy. And
yeah, it's tough though. I mean, because there are teams that tend to promote from within in the organization, and there are times when, like we've discussed in the draft, it's best man available. And so there are times when you will go in and you're like, yeah, this is the guy we're hiring, hands down. And with that new rule in the NFL, they still have to bring, minority candidates in and interview them, which is good to get, to have that diversity, but it almost creates more division because of that fact. These guys are being brought in knowing they're not going to get the job. The Pittsburgh Steelers are doing that right now with the GM position. Like, I know you said all the current spots are filled, but Kevin Colbert is retiring after the draft.
Yeah, no, you're right. About
and
that,
so the Steelers have been bringing in outside guys to interview them just to fill that requirement, even though they've already decided they are going to promote from within, either Omar Khan or their scouting, their lead of scouting. I can't remember who that is right now, but as a result, those guys that are coming in for the interviews, they know they're very unlikely to get the position, but the Steelers have to do their due diligence at that point so that they're not violating any league rules. And so that
Exactly.
is a tough thing. You know, it's when you get into these situations with Brian Flores where it wasn't clear who the Giants and the Dolphins and the Broncos were going to hire. They hadn't really made that decision in advance. And then bringing Flores in and him feeling as though he was just there as the publicity interview.
Yeah.
You know, and that's where it becomes tough, and that's that gray area where the NFL needs to figure out some balance so that we're not having these situations where there's guys that feel as though they're just there because they're there. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. And I do kind of feel bad for Flores because when he got let go by Miami, I think everyone was just utterly shocked because this is a guy that, without a doubt, has taken a Miami team and for the last 20 years has just been bad and giving them the best record that they've ever had over the last couple of years. When you look just back 3 years ago, Miami team should have not won a game. They might have only been able to win one game, and Brian Flores was like, no, we're going to win 5.
Yeah.
Also, going back to that season, there being reports saying that, the owner offered Brian Flores $100,000 per loss that season. And like on paper, like there's gonna be people that sit back and go, yeah, I'd take $100,000 per loss. Like, I'll get $1.6 million for a year. Get 16 losses. Yeah, sure, I'll do it. But to a guy who has always dreamed about being a coach or a head coach and who's just in that athletic world, he can't do that. And
No, and nobody should. Like that is one of the biggest issues I have with all of this is that is such a bullshit thing for a team to do, to try and tank a season in that way. And you're not just tanking your team, you're ruining that guy's career. Like, great, he goes 0-16, he gets $1.6 million, and then he never gets another job in the NFL again.
Well, yeah, just look at Hugh Jackson,
Right?
Someone like when all that news came out, Hugh Jackson came out and said, "Oh yeah, like I got offered the same deal." And it's like, I didn't get necessarily the same amount of money, but you better believe that like I got paid during that time. It's like, "Oh, like okay, Hugh, like sure. Yeah, you got paid a bunch of money to lose games. What have you done in the NFL? You're not a head coach, you're not a coordinator, you're just doing fuck all."
Right?
Like how are you looking at that going, yes, this is good. No self-respecting coach is going to do that. And I think Flores was like, no. And then there was just always this issue within the building of just like, well, this guy's just going to constantly say no to us. And this is what, Miami wanted Tua because at the beginning of the year, Miami fans were cheering tank for Tua, tank for Tua.
Yeah.
And then obviously Herbert came into the question. All the experts were saying Herbert. I wasn't at that time just because I had my own issues with Herbert. But the fact that you see where Herbert is now and where Tua is right now, you're like, they probably should have taken Herbert.
I mean, maybe you got to remember how this last season ended for Miami. Everybody had, forgotten about them because they started so horribly.
Yep.
And they were in a division that was all of a sudden competitive between the Patriots and the Bills.
Yep.
And so everybody was talking about Josh Allen and Mac Jones, and they forgot about Tua, and he roared back. And had that division been a little bit more suspect like years past, and not so dominant from 2 other teams, they had a chance that they could have potentially had a playoff spot. They were still in it in the final week.
Yeah, you're completely right.
And I really hope that Brian Flores gets another job because he deserves it. He did a great job. And the fact that he said no to these allegations that he's got out there, I am so glad he did. And it speaks to his character.
Yeah.
And I really hope he gets another head coaching job because he deserves it. He is an excellent football mind. And I think he could do great things anywhere he goes. And, much like Byron Leftwich, he's been overlooked for many years. I think it's time. We do not have enough black head coaches in the NFL.
Right now, there's only one.
Like, a lot of these guys are the guys who have been playing this game for years. They know this game.
Yep.
They know it better than some of these crusty old white guys that really only learned about the game in the classroom.
Yeah.
And they need their opportunities because I think they could do phenomenal things.
Without a doubt. And it like when I was looking at it earlier this week, I was really sitting back going like, there has to be more than just Mike Tomlin in the NFL as a black head coach. And I had to go through it. I'm like, no, white guy, white guy, white guy, white guy, white guy. And, I'm just sitting back. I'm going like it's really only Mike Tomlin, which is shocking because you feel like there's more, but there really isn't. And like what you're saying, Brian Leftwich should easily be a head coach candidate. Like he has just been at the top of list for years. Brian Flores should have never been fired.
Yep.
Like that. Again, like he took a team last year and almost made them a playoff contender. He had a team this year who started 1-7 and almost brought them back to playoff. But yeah, it's shocking.
And for Mike Tomlin, being the only black head coach, he still faces criticism that some of these other white coaches don't. We saw it partway through the season when the Steelers were struggling, and everybody started saying, "Oh, Mike Tomlin's done. He needs to go back and he's probably going to go back and take a college job after this season." And Mike Tomlin came out and said, "Shut your damn mouth. Why are you coming at me with this? Sean Payton has a worse record than I have right now. Why are you not saying Sean Payton's going to leave and go and take a university coaching job? Like, what is this bullshit?"
Oh, I am exactly.
I am Steelers. I bleed black and gold, and I am Stan. Like, I don't know where you guys are getting these stories from. And I am so glad he came out and just, verbally smacked those reporters in the mouth after that question.
Well, and to look at Mike Tomlin and go, the worst record that he's ever had is 8-8. And it's like he's still performing really, really well with a quarterback at this age isn't playing his best football.
Mm-hmm.
And, he has a young team and he's had to put out fires here, and there. We all forgot the fact that Mike Tomlin had to deal with a batshit crazy Antonio Brown. Not only Antonio Brown, but also a psychotic Le'Veon Bell for years. Mm-hmm. And yeah, we've said this before that we think Antonio Brown did really only start to really fall off the tracks after that Vontaze Burfict hit. But even then, we still look back at it and go, there was still issues with Antonio Brown before then. Like, it's not like he was a squeaky clean record before that.
No, Mike Tomlin has had a lot of big personality guys that he's had to rein in the past as well. He had Ike Taylor, who was a very vocal cornerback, James Harrison, who was always outspoken. And he had a lot of these guys that he's been able to really coach and teach how to balance the game and their personality so that they don't get too big for the team.
Yeah.
He is an excellent coach that way. And people forget, like, in the last 15 years, there's only one head coach that has a better win percentage than Mike Tomlin, and that's Bill Belichick.
Yeah.
Outside of Bill Belichick, Mike Tomlin has the best win percentage of any coaches in the last 15 years since getting that job in Pittsburgh.
Exactly. Yeah. And going back to Flores, I think he should get the Houston Texans job.
Yes.
I think Houston should look at that and go, you know what? We have a quarterback in Deshaun Watson. He says he doesn't want to play for us. Maybe we go out and get the guy that he wants to play for. And Brian Flores has said multiple times he wants Deshaun Watson. He wants Deshaun Watson. Like, the one thing for me with Flores is that he basically every team that he went to, he's like, you know what? Like, I'm linked to Deshaun Watson. Like, I'd like to go get him if we can. but you're still going to have to give up a lot to go get him. And that
Yeah.
puts you behind. With this scenario, it's like, why don't I just go to the guy, and we have some early picks because the Texans aren't a great team this year. And we're going to bring him back, and I can bring in my philosophy. We can get this boat turned around pretty damn quickly. Like, we forget 2 years ago when Deshaun Watson was playing, he led the NFL in passing yards, and the team won 4 games, which is insane. And someone in the comments saying Jets head coach Salah is Muslim, and that's true. We did forget that. But yeah. So there is another minority coach in the league, but again, to look back at that and go, there's two in the league right now. It's not good enough, but you know what? I've always said you always go for the best guy available, and some of these black head coach candidates aren't clearly getting looked at as the best head coach candidate. And
despite being on paper, like if you take race out of it and you look at it on paper, they are the best candidate.
Yeah, like the best head coach candidate this offseason is Brian Flores. He proved it. He's a head coach, or he was a head coach for 3 years. He had a winning record. You know, he was able to take a team that for the last 2 years prior to this season, no one said was going to be a good team. And then they had a horrific start to the season and was able to bring that team back to almost making the playoffs. This guy was the best and without a doubt the most qualified head coaching candidate, and he's a guy who doesn't have a job right now. Now, am I happy with Matt Elderflus as my head coach? Yeah, I'm ecstatic. I really love that pick for the Bears. I think that is the right pick for the Bears.
Yeah, and we got to remember Brian Flores did all of this with the general manager and ownership teams completely against him and wanting him losing games. And he still went out there and pulled all this off while they were trying to get him to.
Yeah, they were essentially trying to sabotage him throughout the entire time. And like even that just makes it so much better. It's crazy to me. I really hope he gets a job. I think he's gonna end up getting the Houston Texans job.
I think so too.
The Texans, they need a guy like that, and I think they're gonna have to kind of sit back and go, you know what? It might be the good decision to let Flores kind of take over the team a little bit, because if we let that happen, it might be better scenario because our generational talent quarterback is gonna be happier.
The only thing I will say for Brian Flores is he gets that job. He needs to be prepared if things go badly for Deshaun Watson and he does not end up playing again. He needs to be ready to take that next guy up and still build a franchise with him.
Yeah.
You know, he needs to get out of that tunnel vision of, oh, I only want Deshaun Watson. He needs to make sure he's ready for the possibility of Deshaun Watson never playing another snap in the NFL.
Which is very, very true. That is very true.
No.
And I think he can live with that. I think in the scenario, he might be looking at a quarterback in the first round if he does go to Houston and he finds out, hey, well, Deshaun Watson's never going to play a game in the NFL ever again. There could be that possibility. But at the moment, he really still should be a head coach. And again, same with Brian Leftwich. Him going to New Orleans, I think, is a good move, because he is one of the top candidates out there.
Yeah, and New Orleans is still kind of in that rebuilding sort of phase, but they don't have any key players in place yet. And so that gives Byron Leftwich the opportunity to really work with the management team, the GM, and the ownership, and build the team that they can all agree on. You know, go after the players they all think are going to be the best fit. It's not he's inheriting a first overall pick quarterback and he has to make it work with that guy. And I think that is why that's the best situation for Byron Leftwich. It'll give him the opportunity to install the system he wants, that he's going to be best with, and that he thinks is going to be the most successful.
And then he can also bring in the players that he wants.
We've got this quarterback, but he doesn't really work with my system, so we're going to have to patchwork it through. that will be the best setup for him. So here's hoping he lands in New Orleans with Sean Payton announcing his semi-retirement, his temporary retirement.
Yep.
I'm sure we're going to see Sean Payton coaching again in the NFL. I don't think he's done. I think he just wants a bit of a break. This pandemic has been hard on a lot of guys.
That it has. And yeah, good question from the chat. Is anyone gonna hire Flores because of the shitstorm? Yeah, some people have compared this to the Colin Kaepernick situation. I don't necessarily think this is the same situation, because when you were looking at Colin Kaepernick, I think one of the biggest reasons, obviously, it did end up. You're looking at the Colin Kaepernick situation, going, you know what? There's too many people scared to go after him. I really do believe early on, though, in that first kind of off season, why nobody picked him up is because people just didn't think he was a good quarterback. The 2 years that he was playing before all the stuff happened, he wasn't going and playing at a super high level. He was just kind of this average quarterback that you looked at and you're like, hey, he's not amazing. He's not terrible, but he's not amazing. And, I think obviously with the heat that was around him, people are like, you know what? We're not going to bring him in because there is a lot of heat, but also he's not going to make us super better. It obviously ended up being a thing where teams were like, we are not touching this situation.
Mm-hmm.
And it became racial, but I think that's kind of the thing early on. And I think with Flores, I think a lot more people have learned from that Kaepernick situation. And I think genuinely, if he does, or if a team like Houston is willing to take that next step, and obviously Houston, their three candidates right now are Josh McCown, a guy that I don't remember, and Brian Flores. If I'm an NFL team, I don't care what shit storm Brian Flores has started, I'm gonna hire him because he's going to help my team. And we're gonna worry about that issue later. And Flores has already said if I get hired, I'm still gonna be part of this I'm still gonna deal with this, because it's not something that it just needs to go away. Like, this is something we need to continue to talk about moving forward.
Well, yeah, and I think that speaks to the difference between the Kaepernick and Flores situation. Colin Kaepernick was making a stand on behalf of the Black Lives Matter movement, which was something that was outside of the NFL and that encompassed all of humanity. And that, I think, was what really hindered him. Was he was bringing a lot more media onto the NFL that they viewed as negative media. Whereas what Brian Flores is doing is exactly what Roger Goodell has been preaching he wants to do for years, and have transparency within the league. And that is what Brian Flores is doing. It's not about, cops shooting, black teens in some other city. This is about Brian Flores going, look, we instituted this Rooney Rule for a reason, and there are still teams out there violating it, and we need transparency to make sure this stops.
Exactly.
It needs to stop. And I think Brian Flores is going into a potential Texans job and going, look, I'm on board here, you guys. If you guys are transparent and we are discussing things and we are going forward looking to build a winning team, I'm all on board. Then there's what reason would I have to start a shitstorm with you guys? The reason that I'm doing this with Miami and Denver and New York is because they were being underhanded, they were being sneaky, they were trying to sabotage me, and they were doing it all behind closed doors so that the NFL couldn't do anything about it. And I'm tired of seeing this happen, and I'm tired of seeing other guys take the fall for it, and it's not happening anymore.
Yeah.
And I think that's the big difference. That's why I think Brian Flores still has the potential, because it also speaks to his character. You're bringing in a character guy who your players are then going to be able to come into the locker room and into the facility and know that if there's a problem and somebody has said something inappropriate higher up, they know they're going to be able to go to their coach and go, man, what's this bullshit happening? And Brian Flores is going to speak up for them. Which is good. We need more of that in the league, because there's still issues there where there's inappropriate hazing from ownership and management on these young black players.
Yeah. Well, And it's one of those things is that we're all kind of looking at the generation of the owners right now, and they're old school football. They're old school people. Once we get moved past this generation, there's going to be a lot more transparency, I think, but we're still kind of living in that limbo area of where we still have a lot of these guys,
Mm-hmm.
and they're not really willing to kind of go through their new ways. And you know what, like, we live in a society where we want some of these changes, and more people like Brian Flores need to speak up. And again, like what you're saying, that is a great difference, because Kaepernick was talking about specifically police brutality against black people, and Brian Flores is like, we want transparency in the league.
Yeah.
Like, it's
Like
an
I just want
internal
to be
league
able to get a
issue.
job without feeling like I've been run through the ringer and brought in just as a publicity.
Exactly. And one of the things that I saw with Elway, because he released a statement, and to me, the statement, I just looked at and went like, man, this is another reason for you to get the fuck out of Denver, because your statement is so stupid and bad. Like, it makes you look worse. And he goes, oh, we had just come off of interviewing someone, like another head coach candidate, and that went many hours into the night, and we only had a few hours of sleep, this, that, and the other thing. It's like, if you know you are going to interview a head coach candidate and you are not necessarily as alert as you could be, push it back. Go, hey, listen, the previous interview we did went later into the evening. We know you have a lot of stuff on your plate, but we need to push this back so we can give you the most amount of proper attention and give you the best feeling that we can. Not going, yeah, we had 3 hours of sleep, so that's why we didn't look like we cared all that much when you were interviewing. Like,
Right, and that's exactly it. It's respecting the other person. And here's the thing: we all have one of these.
yep,
GMs for NFL teams usually have 4 or 5 of these.
yeah,
Like it would have been nothing for you after that interview to shoot a message to Brian Flores and go, "Hey, look, bud, we just had an interview. It ran really long. It's late at night. I know we got you scheduled in at 9 tomorrow morning. Can we maybe push that back till the afternoon, or even reschedule for another day? Because we want to do this right, and we want to make sure we're getting you our full attention."
yeah.
But
And
of course, he
that didn't
didn't,
happen.
and now he's backpedaling and trying to make excuses.
Yeah, and the thing is like, if you get a text message, if you're Brian Flores in that situation, you're like, this is kind of shitty. Like it's kind of putting me behind schedule for what I could possibly do. But I'm also looking at that going like, we want to give you our full attention and give you our best possible scenario for you. I look at that and go, you know what? At least they care.
Yeah, at least they're communicating with me. Like if they're willing to reach out and communicate with me in this situation, then I know if I get this job, we're going to be able to have that rapport. Whereas,
Exactly.
honestly, with the way they treated him, I don't know if he would have enjoyed any of his time in Denver if they had hired him. If that's how they're going to treat him in an interview and how they're going to dismiss him and then they bring him in, you know you're going it alone at that point.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, moving on from this very, very tough topic that is up, and to a little bit more of a lighter conversation and a more humorous conversation, at least for yourself and myself, is the Washington football team finally has a new name. This was leaked Tuesday night and officially announced on Wednesday morning. We have the Washington football team moving on from the football team name, and they are now known as the Washington Commanders. Sterling, give me your thoughts on it, man.
I mean, they had 2 years to pick a name. You and I have discussed it in the past. You know, we talked about it about midway through the season here. I don't like when teams pick 3-syllable names for their team name. You know, like you got to think of your fans. You know, like they're going to be coming into these stadiums. They're going to be chanting. They're going to be cheering for you. You want to keep it simple. You know, you want 1 syllable. You want 2 syllables. You need Chiefs, Broncos, Steelers, Ravens, Bengals, Browns, Dolphins. I could go on and on and on. You want 1 and 2 syllables. Any of these 3-syllable teams you see out there, you always see them getting shortened. You know, you've got your Buccaneers. They become the Bucks. You know, we live in Canada, so you got the Calgary Stampeders. Everybody, go Stamps, go. You know, that's what it always comes down to. So now they needed to look at that and factor that in, because the first thing I thought of was, okay, Commanders, these fans are going to be in the stands going, let's go Comes. That is absolutely horrendous. That is terrible. How did you not see that coming? You're going to take the first syllable of your team name and just add the S that's on the end, and that is how your chant is formed. It is just horrible. Nobody's going to be sitting out there going, Commanders. Like, you're going to be out of breath before the first chant.
Well, and if it's not Commandos, one of the things that I thought, it's Commies, and it's just
Right?
yeah,
I can't think of any combination of that team name that can become a real rah-rah team building inspirational chant that's going to really fire up the fans and fire up the team in your home stadium and get you really going. Like,
yeah,
this this Washington team has just been making mistakes for decades now, and they've got to stop. Like, they need changes from ownership all the way down. At this point, sell the team, move it to another city so you can pick a new name again, because this is god awful.
yeah. And Josh, who has been on the podcast with us before, we try to get him on, but there's scheduling issues with him and what we can do. We're always happy to have him on. Obviously, he's a big Washington fan, and when the news broke out, we're talking with him, and he's just like, I just hate this organization. I hate this team. Like, football team would have been a better name to have. And we just went through a list of names that there was talks about.
Mm-hmm.
Like, for me, I heard the name Red Wolves, and I was like, that's an amazing name, the Washington Red Wolves. You're not offending anyone, I
Yep.
think. I don't know, maybe. But you know what? Like, you're still kind of keeping with your color scheme that you previously had. It sounds like a cool name. And, like, again, the shortened version, let's go Wolves, let's go Wolves. And, there was a bunch of other names that they could have chose from. And you settle on Commanders, and it just feels lazy. Again, you had 2 years to really figure this out. A lot of teams, they end up letting their fans and the city run a poll to see who they want. Obviously, in today's world, you couldn't really do that because we'd be left with the Washington Football McFootball face.
Right. Yeah, but honestly, that would be a better team name. And it just, it does. It feels forced. It feels rushed. It feels like they didn't put any actual thought into it. It's like Dan Snyder threw a temper tantrum, and he's like, "Oh, I can't be the Redskins anymore. I'm just gonna choose whatever fucking terrible team name." And again, being that we live in Canada, there was a joke that a few of us were making, because we've had it happen in the past with CFL. There was a period of time where we had two teams that were called the Rough Riders. And it's like this expansion team came in and they're like, we want to be called the Rough Riders. I'm like, well, we already have a team called the Rough Riders. Can you please pick something else? And they're like, no, that's what we want to be called. And the
Yeah.
league allowed it. And I almost wonder if Dan Snyder was like, well, we're Washington. We should be named after the commander in chief. Let's be the Chiefs. And the NFL went, there's
Or
kind
the
of already a
Chiefs.
team with that name, but we want to be the Chiefs. Well, fine, we'll be the Commanders then.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
it's so terrible. I can't get over it. Like, just move the team to another city.
Yeah. Well, and you know what this felt like? It felt like Dan Schneider got told by a PA person that he had. He's like, all right, listen, the Redskins name didn't go over well. This was bad for us. We need to find something that is not offensive. And Dan Schneider was like, fuck it. Let's get a bunch of just like social media people that are just going to be so very much just like focus group that no one could be offended by it. and they just had like a bunch of people that you just sit back like, oh, you can't say number 2 pencil because it offends people who like number 2 pencils. And it felt like that kind of group got brought in to choose the name. And it's like, yes, Commanders. Okay, cool. Let's go, comes. Let's go, comes. You know, it again, this whole process to me, it just felt bad. Dan Schneider, man, just get rid of your team, please. Like, what? It just seems like it's just one stupid decision after the other.
It really does. Yeah, and that's what I mean. It's been that way since the turn of the century.
Yeah.
You know, they were competitive, and they had good teams and good things going for them in the 90s, and then after that it's just been downhill for them ever since.
It really has, and I'm still baffled by the thing that they had 2 years to figure this out, and they just couldn't get it done.
Right? Any just about any team name would have been better than Commanders.
Right?
Right? Like there's expansion teams coming into other leagues that are coming up with better names than.
Yeah. Well, and you know, kind of going back to the CFL, the Edmonton Elks is what they're now called. They were
Yep.
formerly the Edmonton Eskimos, which they obviously this came out all around the same time that the Washington Redskins was being brought up as issues. And you know, like we all kind of felt like Elks was like, it's Elk, what Edmonton Elk, and you're just kind of like, it's kind of shit, but it's still better than Commanders.
Well, and it made sense why they went that route. You know,
Mhm.
they said we don't really want to change our team look. You know, our logo, which was an EE. They
Yep.
had two E's on their helmet, and so they're like, we want the name to start with an E. Let's pick something that has to do with the team and the city and the province still. And I mean, the elk
It's
is a gigantic, majestic creature, so it makes sense.
and it's
You
not too
know, and
far off away from Eskimo culture as well.
right.
So
But I
yeah,
mean, it allowed them to stay within what they wanted, and it made sense.
it did.
Washington, there was no transparency through it. None of it made any sense as they were trying to make their decisions. They had some good names on the table and went with this horrendous option.
Yeah. It's just the most silly, stupid stuff out there. Like, you and I both looked at each other when we were at work and the name was announced, and we just both started laughing.
Right?
We're just
Started laughing, then we went, okay, so which one of us do you think we can get Josh to come and start cheering for our team instead?
right.
Because I honestly, I don't know if he's going to stay a Washington fan after this.
He has ultimately said he's like, I don't know if I can continue supporting this organization just because they just can't there's just so much issue. And for me, I've jokingly said it's like I'm gonna give the Bears, a couple more years. If they ruin Fields, I'm gonna move on. But that's just me going, you know what, like the organization just hasn't been able to get stuff right. For him, it's a legitimate thing of like this team could be moved at any time. This team could get, just thrown out of the league at any time. Dan Schneider, like there are legitimate issues that for someone, for instance, like Josh, he could simply say, I can't support this organization anymore. And you'd be like, yep, you're right. For me,
Yep.
obviously, I always say it very jokingly that I'm going to become a Bengals fan because of Joe Burrow if the Bears can't get it right, but I could never do it because the team hasn't been great and they've done things that piss me off, but there's no legitimate reason. I'm gonna stick through that team thick and thin. I'm a Red Wings fan. I had a lot of years of success for the NHL. We had 25 years of playoff success. I can handle 4 or 5 years of being the bottom of the barrel. And when people always go, "Oh, it must be nice to be a Red Wings fan," it's like, "Oh, it is really shitty to be a Red Wings fan right now." It's like, well, you know, how many 25-year playoff runs have you guys had?
Right?
Like I'm happy to sit back with that and take the L's for a couple of years and move on. that's what a true fan does. But yeah, for Josh, it is one of those things where you look at it and go, this makes sense why you would want to move on from this organization.
Yeah. A person can only take so much bull crap, for sure.
And there has been a lot not just being placed on the plate, but being shoveled down that fan base's throat.
Yeah.
The whole situations with RG3 of how, and then Cousins, Dwayne Haskins, then Brandon Sheriff, Trent Williamson, just all this. You're just sitting back, and that's just from the player standpoint. Then you start looking outside, it's like, well, Dan Schneider and Jake Gruden, were doing all this, and then John Gruden was added into that mix. And you know what, that it kind of seems crazy to me. This thought just popped up to my mind, that with all the information and investigation going on with the Washington team, the only person who has been fired is a person who was never part of that organization.
Right?
Like John Gruden, obviously he didn't get fired, he stepped down from the Raiders, but
yes,
he needed to go because, again, the things that he was saying were horrific. Yeah, they were from years ago, and I've always been a person that said, you know what, if you said something back in 2012 and look at it now, you're a different person. Like, I said some stupid shit back in 2012. Sterling, I'm sure you said the exact,
yep.
you can have the exact same stuff. And do I think John Gruden feels bad about those comments? Yeah. Do I think he is a different person from it? Maybe. Hopefully. But it's like he needed to go from the things that he was saying from that standpoint. But yeah, like, I've never been a fan of looking back what happened years ago, because, for instance, look at James Gunn, the director of Guardians of the Galaxy films. People were calling him out over tweets that he made back in like '08 and that stuff.
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, he made a homophobic remark back in 2008. He comes out, he's like, listen, I apologize. I'm not the same person. I do not have those beliefs anymore. Like, you're allowed to grow as a person.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, it is kind of funny to think that the only firing, air quotes, happened for a guy who's not even being investigated.
Well, and I mean, the tough thing too is it is difficult to fire an owner from a team. I think we've only seen that happen one time, and that was in the NBA recently when the Clippers owner.
I forget his name, but his
Yeah,
girlfriend filmed him having an argument, and
and he
yeah,
was saying some pretty horrible racial slurs throughout.
yeah,
And but that's the only time an owner has been like forced to sell his team essentially.
and it was
But
essentially because a bunch of celebrities came around and were like, "Listen, we will give you combined $5 billion. Just get the fuck out."
yeah,
Yeah, and I think the NFL, if they truly have any power, the only thing the NFL can do in this scenario, because you can't fire Dan Schneider, what you
no,
can do is you can kick the team out of the organization, out of the league.
yeah,
But that it creates a whole lot of headaches.
yeah. That would be very difficult for them to do. But something's got to be done because he clearly is not the type of person that the NFL wants representing their teams and the league.
No. Yeah, what can we really do with that? But yeah, I think to end off the podcast today, we'll talk a little bit about the Super Bowl. Not going into full details because that's going to be happening next week. But how do you like the Super Bowl matchup going in?
I do like it honestly. It's we talked all year about how it was starting to shape up like it was going to be Pat Mahomes against Tom Brady again, or Tom Brady against Bill Belichick. So I am really excited to see one team that hasn't been in it since the 80s. It's been a long time for the Bengals since they've had an opportunity at the championship. And a Rams team that, even though they were there just a couple years ago, it's a very different look team. You know, a couple years ago when they were there, it was Sean McVay still, but it was really just Todd Gurley was their offense. It was run the ball up the middle, play action for Jared Goff.
Yep.
You know, and that was all that they could ever do. You know, whereas this year they are a much more diverse team, which is what I said the LA Rams needed to do after that horrible Super Bowl loss to the Patriots. They needed to diversify, and that's what they've done. You know, they went out and they swapped quarterbacks. They got Matt Stafford in there, who has proven that he is an elite quarterback. They have lots of tools around him in Cooper Kupp. They went out and got Odell Beckham Jr., which gives you a nice 1-2 tandem, and they've got so many great tools there that it's going to be a very competitive game. I really like this matchup. It's going to be a fun Super Bowl to watch. It's not going to be, you know, my favorite, those defensive battles. We're still going to get a lot of that because you've got a really good defense on both sides. Aaron Donald really wants that Super Bowl ring. I think we're going to see some great things from him. I don't know if that's going to be enough to shake the ice loose in Joe Burrow's veins, though. Like, he took 9 sacks against the Titans and still won that game.
And not only did he take 9 sacks, but at no point, at any point when he was getting sacks, did he look riled or did he look like he was getting nervous. Like, every single time he got sacked, he just popped up and he was like, all right, I didn't hear no bell. Let's keep going.
Right? Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly it. He's like, okay, well, you got through on that one. We will make sure to send an extra blocker over on that side next time. Like, that's all it was for Burrow, is every time something like that happened, it was mental note, we're not going to do that again.
Yeah. It felt like the classic film, the Monty Python Holy Grail film, where it's the Black Knight, where he just keeps getting limbs chopped off. He's like, 'tis just a scratch. You know,
Right.
that's really what it felt like with Burrow, where he just get up, he's like, all right, cool, whatever, move on.
Yeah. And that's the concerning thing for LA is, you know, like, you're going to have to get in his face, but you're going to have to rattle him.
Which doesn't happen.
I don't think it's just about hitting him. I think you got to get your hands up. If you're not getting through the line, you got to knock the ball down when he's trying to throw it over the middle. You got to get outside and take away some of these chuck down throws for him. Like, you got to get inside his head. And you're not going to do that just by hitting him. You got to do that by outsmarting him, which is going to be very hard to do because Joe Burrow is a very smart quarterback.
And to be honest, I just don't know if you can get into his head, because I remember hearing a story about with Burrow is that the dude literally does not feel pressure.
Yep.
And when you have a guy who physically does not feel pressure in stressful situations, like, how do you rattle a guy like that? And not only that, just the level of confidence that he has, it's not cockiness. It is confidence, and there's a very clear difference. It's like with a guy who has more confidence than the entire Rams team combined, and the fact that he literally cannot feel pressure. How do you how do you get past this guy?
And that's just it. If they manage to do that, if they manage to get into his head, they'll be the first ones to do it. Because even going back to college, nobody's been able to rattle him. You know, that's why they call him Joe Cool.
Yes, has Joe Burrow had bad games? When he played my Chicago Bears in week 2, the Bears made him look stupid. He had 3 passes back to back to back where he threw interceptions.
Yep, but we discussed that earlier in the show of how Joe Burrow came out this season looking a little shaky at the start because he came off of a bad knee injury last year, didn't get to complete his rookie season, didn't really know what he had in this team, and was trying to find his identity. And your Bears got lucky. They got to play him at the beginning of the season when he was looking like that, instead of playing him in week 16, when I really think they would have embarrassed the Bears if it was the other way around.
Oh, Joe Burrow would have pulled each individual Bears player down, and he would have pulled their pants down and went, yep, here we go.
Yeah.
That's how bad it would have been. Yeah, last thing I'm going to say.
Looking forward to that Super Bowl matchup. I think it's going to be a fun game to watch. I think we're going to see a lot of offense. But I think Joe Burrow is going to run away with it second half.
I think so as well.
We will discuss more of that next week. We'll have all the press stuff to talk about next week. All the interviews. I'm sure there will be some dramatic comments made by Odell Beckham Jr., the only guy that might be able to give Joe Burrow a run for his money on confidence level.
But that's more cockiness than confidence, I'd say.
I mean, he's proven himself as far as I'm concerned.
He has proven himself.
All those years in New York when he had Eli Manning. When he was with the Browns, he didn't do much, but again, that's the Browns. They always suck. Even when you look at them on paper and they go, man, they got all these stars. For some reason, that Browns organization always ends up sucking.
Yeah.
And
they're just one of the cursed franchises.
Yeah, I'm glad OBJ got out of there. And I'm glad he's keeping that cockiness in check in LA and not making it all about him. Yeah. Which is smart. That is when the Giants were able to win, it was when OBJ was being confident, not cocky.
Yes.
When he started getting cocky, that was when they started slipping.
Yeah. I'm really excited to watch this Super Bowl. I think this is probably going to be one of the better Super Bowls that we've seen for a while because it doesn't have one of these guys that always seems to be there. I think the last time that we didn't see a Tom Brady in a Super Bowl, how many years ago was that? Or we didn't see a Patrick Mahomes, or we didn't see a Peyton Manning, or this, that, or any other combination. This is kind of one of those years where it goes, you're kind of going, this feels right. This feels like we don't know what could theoretically happen.
Yeah, it's nice to see a lot of guys, and especially two quarterbacks that have both never been there.
Yes. Yep. But yeah, last thing we're going to talk about here is obviously last week we stated that Tom Brady on Saturday announced his retirement, and then as soon as we ended it, a bunch of news where Tom Brady came out and it's like, I did not announce I was retiring. I have not made my decision yet. I'm sitting there going like, oh, fuck you, Adam Schefter. Getting us all hot and bothered. And the only reason that I brought it up is because when I was looking through the tweets during the show, it was Adam Schefter reported it, Pro Football Focus is reporting it, NFL people that I know and trust are like, yep, and that's the only reason. And then obviously it came out that at that time it was false, but not too long after, Tom Brady did come out and announce his retirement after 22 years of football. And the greatest of all time. I think not only the greatest of all time for football, but I think you have to put him in the category of the greatest athlete to ever do it. Because you look at what Michael Jordan did. He obviously won the 6 rings and he was so good. And you look at Kobe Bryant, you look at, Floyd Mayweather and all these other guys, and you just kind of sit back and you go, yeah, but Tom Brady was able to win 7 Super Bowls. And it's hard not to classify Tom Brady as the greatest sports player of all time, in my opinion.
It's hard not to, but honestly, I've always had issues with trying to name one over another from different sports.
Exactly.
Different sports, they require different athletic capabilities, different mindsets, different learning skills. Like, he is the greatest football player we have ever seen, and he is up there on that pedestal with the greatest athletes ever. But I will never.
It's hard to crown one single individual.
This guy's number 1, Jordan's number 2, LeBron. Like, I won't do that. Like, even within a league, like even with the NBA, for example, I can't say definitively that Michael Jordan or Kobe Bryant or LeBron James are the best. They all did magnificent and mind-blowing things in their own right, in their own generations. And you can't really compare them because times change, sports change, athletic abilities change.
Without a doubt.
We're always going to see that happening. And in 15 years, 25 years, there's going to be somebody else in the NFL and in the NBA and in the NHL that are talked about being the best ever. Because the best ever really comes down to the best right now.
You know what, like you bring up a really good conversation point for that. And this is one thing that I've always kind of thought about. Like when we talk about the NHL, who would you say is the greatest player to ever play?
See, that's a tough one too, because there's so many different facets. I would say it comes down to either there's four for me: Wayne Gretzky, Bobby Orr, Mario Lemieux, and Sidney Crosby.
See, for me, I look at that and I go, the greatest hockey player to ever play, you have to give that to Wayne Gretzky. And my reasoning behind that is you take away all the goals that he has ever scored, and we need to remember that Wayne Gretzky holds the record for the most goals ever scored. You take all of those away, he still holds the most points ever in the NHL.
Yeah.
To take away a completely take away one stat and to still be that at that point, you're like, it's hard to not claim and give him the title of the greatest of all time for the NHL. Like we're there. I know in the hockey community, there's the talk of, when is Alex Ovechkin gonna break the record for Wayne Gretzky because he is the closest. And people are like, well, he's still like 4 years away from potentially breaking the record. And you look at Ovechkin right now, he looks old, he looks battered, and he looks bruised. He's still one of the best hockey players to ever do it and one of the best players in the NHL. But to think that he has to do like 50-goal seasons for like the next 4 years to just break the record is insane. But yeah, for like I agree with you, Bobby Orr, he is one of the greatest of all times. Mario Lemieux, that's another one a lot of people bring up in the who's the greatest hockey player to ever play, and they throw Mario Lemieux's name over Gretzky. But to me, like it has to be, you have to crown Wayne Gretzky. Yeah, I know he played in a different time of hockey, and would he have necessarily had the same level of success at that time or in this time of hockey? We don't know. We can never know that. But just to look at that single stat alone, I have to go, you have to crown Gretzky, in my
See, and
opinion.
that is the argument I make, though, is you look at all the things that have changed within that league in the last 30 years. The goaltenders' pads have gotten bigger. The rules
Goalies have
around
gotten bigger.
crease have gotten more intense. You got to be more careful when you're crashing the net. And you take away all those tools that Wayne Gretzky had around him as well. Is he getting as many points? Sure, he's scoring goals, but you look at the size of goaltenders' pads now to when he was scoring his goals in the 80s, and they're significantly smaller. So yeah, a lot more pucks were going in, and you look at the stats overall in the league, there were a lot more goals being scored. The point leaders were often getting 100 plus, 120 points a season. Nowadays, if they're breaking 100, we're going, wow, they had a really good year. Oftentimes we're seeing guys top out in the 85 to 95 range. And so that has changed a lot. And that is
It
the only
has.
reason why I don't like saying this guy's the greatest of all time. Because there's so many things that change. If Mario Lemieux or if Sidney Crosby and Alex Ovechkin were playing in the 80s, think about how much they would have been scoring. Wayne Gretzky, if anything, he was the trendsetter because he changed the game. Up to that point, it was a gritty, physical. You had to be a two-way player. You had to be able to check. You had to be able to do it all. Gretzky came in and said, no, I'm going to be fast. I'm going to be delicate. I'm going to be finesse all the way up the ice. And he changed the game. And that's when you see a lot of those goal scorers coming from now. The guys like the Conor McDavids, the Taylor Halls, guys like that come into the league. And if not for Wayne Gretzky, we might not have seen that shift. And it was Wayne Gretzky that really resulted in a lot of those rule changes happening. And if not for that, who's to say Alex Ovechkin isn't scoring 85 goals a season, a goal a game, and then getting another 70 assists.
Yeah.
Crosby, who often gets more assists than goals, what would have stopped him from getting 200 points in a season?
No, I hear. I do.
Without all those changes that have happened, that is the only tough thing, is comparing what it was to what it is. That's why I don't like saying this guy's number one, this guy's number two. When we're looking historically, it's a big pedestal, and they're all standing up there as champions together, in my mind.
I like that. And for me, I've always kind of had that approach too, is that specifically with the LeBron James, Michael Jordan talk, for me, I will lean more towards Jordan than I will LeBron, just because I think the mindset is Jordan just had just that mindset to take him over the other edge. But it is tough to kind of go back and look and go, okay, well, if you bring this player, but that's always the what if.
Yeah.
But now what I want to do is kind of go, instead of talking about who we think the greatest of all time is, who do you think is the best hockey player in the world right now?
I'm not going to be a good judge of this. Unfortunately, I don't have cable, and so I haven't watched any hockey at all this season. And so a lot of what I'm basing my thoughts on would be past years, not so much this year or even last season. And so it's hard for me to say. From what I gather, I would have to say it's probably Conor McDavid, simply because he doesn't have a ton around him. He does have another superstar player in Leon Draisaitl right there, but a lot of what you see McDavid do is himself. He's one of those end-to-end players, two-way players. You see a lot of back checking from him as well. He reminds me of Sidney Crosby when he was younger. And the only reason I don't put Alex Ovechkin in that category, and a lot of people hate me for it, is because he is primarily a goal scorer. That's what he does. He's that typical Russian. We've seen it with other guys like Sergei Fedorov and Evgeny Malkin, that they sort of wait at center ice until the puck comes to them, and then they skate really hard to the net. They put the puck in the net, and that's what they do. If they lose that battle to the net and the puck starts going the other way, you don't see them hustling down their back checking. And for me, as a sports lover, much like with the NFL, you got to play defense as well as offense. If you don't, then you're not a two-way player and you're not the best. And that is why Sidney Crosby for many years was one of the best, because he plays excellent offense, but he plays the back check. He's not afraid to get into the corners. He's not afraid to get hit. And granted, Alex Ovechkin's not afraid to get hit either, but I don't see him throwing as many hits as he should be.
Ovechkin throws a ton of hits. Maybe not now, like in the later couple of years, just because he's older. But if you look at prime Crosby versus prime Ovechkin, I'm taking prime Ovechkin, because obviously the goal scoring ability, and Ovechkin had a phenomenal defensive awareness as well, and he was able to put the body on people and just look at him and go, no, I am better. Fair. And with Crosby, it felt with Crosby a lot of the times that if you breathed in his general direction, he was complaining to the refs going, no, he does this, give penalty. I got a lot of that sense from Sidney Crosby, and that's why I've always, not just me being a Red Wings fan and knowing the Red Wings Penguins rivalry, but I've just hated him because he's been a whiny bitch a lot of his years. And that's what I've always felt, and that's why I've always respected Ovechkin a little bit more, is instead of whining to the ref about something, he's just going to go take it and do it himself.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I didn't really see Crosby whining much unless it was a shot to the head. And I don't really blame him for that. And he didn't really start doing that until after that first bad concussion. And at that point, I can't really fault him, because he's like, man, I already missed a full fucking season because some idiot hit me in the head. Can you stop these other guys from hitting me in the head? You want to take head hits out of the game? Then do it.
Yeah, no, I agree.
Call these penalties. So that's where I don't fault Crosby for getting up in the refs' faces and being like, "Why aren't you calling it?" You preach that you want the head injuries gone, and yet you're letting these guys check me into the boards. You're letting these guys hit me in the head. Like, it, just because I'm the superstar and I'm tough to cover, you're going to let them get away with this? No.
And that's why I've respected Ovechkin a little bit more, is because, you know what, he's not even going to say anything to the refs. He's just going to go deal with it.
See, and the problem is Crosby's not big enough to deal with. That's the thing. He never had that toughness. Granted, like he was never a fighter. It was like Gretzky. Like you wouldn't see Gretzky go out there and throw down because he got hit. That's what he had Mark Messier for.
Yeah, and Gretzky also was one of a lot of people, specifically my dad included, who hated the Oilers growing up and hated Gretzky. He felt he was a complainer.
Yeah. When really it was just trying to keep himself safe. And I don't fault him for that, because we lost out on seeing what I think could have been another one of the best players to ever play the game, that would have been like that amazing combination of Alexander Ovechkin and Sidney Crosby in Eric Lindros. His career was cut so short because he got hit in the head so many times and nothing was done about it, and he had so many concussions that he could not continue his career. And It was such a sad thing to see, because he was on pace to become one of the greatest ever.
Yes.
And so I don't fault Sidney Crosby for doing that, because I think after those first few bad injuries and those bad head injuries, he went and he was like, look, I don't want to go into the record books as the next Eric Lindros. I want to go in as the next Mario Lemieux.
I hear you. I hear you.
On my own terms, and being protected properly by the rules of the game. I'm not going to go out there and I'm not going to drop my glove and fight, because my hands are my moneymakers. I'm not going to be throwing haymakers at guys wearing helmets and breaking my knuckles when I need to be using these to stick handle the way I do and top shelf these backhanded spin moves.
Yep. Obviously, you know my opinion on hockey players fighting, and yeah, I'm not even gonna get into that type of conversation here at the current moment, because that's a conversation for future times. But I don't disagree with you on that. We just have two different players that we look at as the greatest of all time, and these are the best discussions to have, is because we can have those. For you, NBA, who you thinking right now?
It's a tie between Michael Jordan and LeBron James.
No, I'm talking like who's playing right now.
Oh, best player right now in the NBA.
Yeah.
That's a tough one, because same thing with the NHL. I haven't had a chance to watch a lot of it lately, and it's hard to really tell, because the NBA is having this influx right now of super teams.
Yep.
We see a lot of guys that they, and LeBron James started this trend really, where you go to a team and you go, hey, let's come together, let's play together and be a big three. And it really makes it hard to pick out who the best is, and prior to those injuries that he had recently, I would say James Harden was one of the best pound for pound, just phenomenal players, but I haven't had a chance to see him play since he came back. And so I don't know if he's still at that level. So I'm going to say James Harden, simply because I haven't seen enough from anybody else to really pick somebody else, unfortunately.
Yeah, and unfortunately for me, I do like basketball, but it's not the sport that I'm the most knowledgeable about. For me, I know football, hockey, and boxing. Those are the three sports that I can talk about at length. But yeah, with basketball, I do kind of look at a lot of the teams. It feels like if you win an NBA championship, it really does feel like the only reason you win is because you do have that super team. I felt with Milwaukee, they kind of broke the trend with that last year when they won, obviously with Giannis. And right now I think like I have to kind of give him the nod for the best player in the NBA right now because he didn't really have a super team around him from what I felt. I could be wrong in that standpoint. Like I said, I'm not the biggest NBA guy. I know you're more of an NBA guy than myself. But yeah, I would probably say Giannis just because it just felt like it was more him leading the charge as opposed to having just this triple threat team. And yeah, in I know some people ask like why aren't we seeing like super teams in football and hockey? Well, because in the NBA you only have 5 guys on the court. And then you really only have what like 10, 12 guys on a team.
Yeah.
And with NHL, well, you only have 5 guys on the ice. Well, you also have 4 lines, on offense and defense, and it's a lot harder.
It's easier to spread $100 million across 11 guys than it is to spread $100 million across 18
24.
guys or 52 guys.
Yes.
And that's what it boils down to is just because there are less players employed by a team in the NBA, that allows them the ability to go out and pay 3 superstars, superstar level contracts, and then fill the team in with the rest being, just positional players.
Yeah.
In the NHL, you can't do that as easily because you get those 2 or 3 star players, and then you can fill out your
30,
first line, second line, and then your third and fourth are suspect. Yeah. So you'll be great during the regular season, but then when the playoffs start and you have to play 7 games against the same team, that's when you see the holes start to show. Because that it's more strategy at that point rather than skill. Basketball very much is the most skilled guys often will win, whereas with football and hockey, there's a lot more strategy, I find.
They're chess matches as opposed to checkers.
Yeah. I would even say, basketball more like playing Battleship.
Yeah.
Than checkers.
Yeah. So last one I'm gonna ask you about is who do you think's the best boxer currently around? If you know much about the boxing scene.
I don't know anything. The best boxer around is the one that finally knocks out and shuts up the Paul brothers.
Fair enough. Yeah. Well, yeah. For obviously, as you know, boxing was my bread and butter. That was my sport for years. I have to give it to Canelo Alvarez. If you even know who that is, no. All right, so
honestly, the last boxing match I actually watched was Tyson Holyfield, and I think that was 1996 or something like that.
That was before I was born.
Yeah, that was the last time I watched a boxing match, and I think I was about 10 years old.
Jesus Christ.
So, other than flipping through the channels and it's like, oh, there's 2 guys hitting each other on TSN. Sit there for a couple minutes. All right, that's the end of the round. I'm gonna go watch something else now.
Yeah,
that is the most I've watched boxing.
Fair enough. But you know what? I think this is a good point to end. This was a really, really good podcast. Honestly, the fact that we made it over 2 hours when you and I were sitting here beforehand going like, yeah, this might be a 30-minute podcast, pump and dump type situation. We had I had a lot of fun. How about you?
Yeah. Oh yeah, lots of fun always.
Yeah.
Yeah, I figured we should at least come on and get to that half-hour mark, but you know us, when we start debating and arguing stuff, since we have such differing views on a lot of things, it tends to stretch out quite a bit.
Yeah, we always joke in the lunchroom at work that we can talk about one topic for a half an hour, and even then we could stretch it out to an hour, and if we want.
Yeah.
But yeah, I want to thank everyone for joining us today. Thank you all. See you next week.
Yes.
Have a good one.
Have an excellent week. Let's get ready for some Super Bowl football.